Hi, everybody. It's Jean Humbrecht here with Humbrecht Law, criminal and traffic defense attorney in Manassas, Virginia. Welcome to my weekly local business spotlight. I have a very special guest today, Dana Richard from Toastmasters, Traveling Tastemasters, possibly Toastmasters International. Dana has been involved in Toastmasters for a long time, and he is going to tell us a little bit about it after I give you a background on him. And I do want to apologize if I'm coughing a little bit. I'm getting over laryngitis. Very difficult for me, for anyone that knows me, to not be able to talk. So I'm going to do my best to get through this. So here we go. Dana Richard served 30 years in the U.S. Air Force, regular and reserve, before retiring as a full colonel in 2012. He retired from the U.S. Federal Civilian Service in 2019, also with 30 years of service. Immediately following retirement, he worked for ICF International as a part-time on-call program manager and is now completely retired, but he's still very busy. He is a graduate of the U.S. Air Force Academy, the National Intelligence University, and the U.S. Air Force Air Command and Staff and Air War Colleges. He is a career intelligence professional, and his last assignment in the U.S. Air Force was at the Senior Individual Mobilization Augmentee on the staff of the Deputy Chief of Staff for Intelligence, Surveillance, and Reconnaissance, following an active duty tour as the Chief of Staff for the Human Capital Management Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence. Prior to his retirement from civil service, he was the Deputy Chief of the Mission Assurance Office and the Continuity of Operations Program Manager for the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency, and previously served as the Acting Assistant Director for Counterintelligence Plans, Policy, and Programs for the Defense Security Service. Dana joined Toastmasters in June of 2013, which is what we're going to be talking about today. He quickly achieved the highest possible education level possible within Toastmasters International, Distinguished Toastmaster. He has held several leadership positions with Toastmasters, including District Director of Toastmasters International District 29, which serves over 130 Toastmasters clubs across Northern Virginia, and he led the district to being one of only 3 in the entire United States to achieve distinguished status for the 2019-2020 program year. He is a recipient of the Excellence in Program Quality Award and the Distinguished District Award from Toastmasters International, and is an International Leadership Committee nominated candidate for International Director in 2023. Today, Dana is going to tell us a little bit about Toastmasters in general and about one very special club in particular. So, Dana, after that distinguished introduction, I'm going to turn it over to you to tell everybody a little bit about Toastmasters.
Yeah, you've got to love those government job titles. So we can panel. If we're talking about those, we spend half the time just going through the job titles. So let's skip all that. We'll go straight to Toastmasters. And I guess the obvious question, Gene, to begin with is, what is Toastmasters anyway? Or let me be more specific. What is Toastmasters International? And I make that distinction because there actually is an organization that's called just Toastmasters without the international, whose members dedicate themselves to learning how to be masters of ceremonies for various types of formal events. We do that as well, but it's not all we do. Toastmasters International began back in 1924. And Dr. Ralph Smedley, who was a director with the YMCA in California, recognized the need for people to develop better public speaking skills. And so he created a club for people to come in, practice, get feedback, and become more comfortable with the public speaking process. And Toastmasters has excelled at helping people learn public speaking skills ever since. And we're coming up on our 100th anniversary. For 99 years since founding, that is what we have done, is to help people really become better public speakers, to develop confidence, to get over those jitters, to move from that white knuckle death grip on the lectern because, oh my God, there are people here and I have to say something to them, to being confident and comfortable speaking. We do that very well, but Toastmasters is more than that. I'm also going to talk about a couple of misperceptions you might have about things that we're not. First off, we do not get together and make toast. Even though it may sound like it from our name. We do not just sit around making toast with wine and champagne, although there actually is a project to learn how to do that well too, that you can do. Nor do we actually just sit around all the time discussing the finer points of parliamentary procedure, which I mentioned because when I first approached about Toastmasters and back in the mid-'80s, that's what I thought they did. What we actually do is that we meet in clubs. And these clubs can be, generally we like them to be around 20 members. And what happens in the club is we do a series of projects from our education program, which we call Pathways. Now, the name's not important, but what is important is that these projects help us develop a variety of different skills, not just public speaking, but really soft skills in general. Now, if you're on the job sites, professional sites these days, if you look at LinkedIn, if you look at Indeed.com, if you look at any of those types of websites, you'll find out that what's really in demand in the workplace today, and will continue to be in demand in the workplace in the future, are those soft skills. This is beyond the technical skills. This is beyond the knowing how to develop, how to create software if you're an IT person. It goes beyond knowing how to do CAD if you're an engineer. This is where you learn how to interact with other human beings on teams. It's the interpersonal communication, it's those human relations, it's the critical thinking, it's the problem solving, it's the being creative, it's making things happen inside a team environment. And we actually help people do those inside this club environment. Now, how does a club environment do this? Well, the club environment is an experiential learning environment. We learning by doing. Now, anybody who's in the audience who's ever been in an on-the-job training program is already familiar with this concept. It gets used a lot in technical training. Why? Because it's the best way to learn something is by doing it. The more we do something, the better we get at doing it, the more comfortable we become at doing it. And we reach a point where we can help others learn how to do it. So our experiential club environment is a real strength. And it's a safe place where people can come and practice these skills. Somebody who has a real fear of public speaking and needs to be able to speak publicly for any reason, perhaps be better at giving professional presentations. Perhaps they have a special event coming up where they're expected to speak and they want to do well at this. Perhaps the supervisor or manager has said that they don't get better public speaking, they're going to lose their job. That's a real incentive. But it creates a safe environment to do these things where we can learn, we can make mistakes, we can experiment, and we get the feedback and we get better and better and better at doing it. In other words, it allows us to make those mistakes in our learning environment rather than in a work environment where they can be more costly to ourselves or to our employers. So this environment is extremely powerful. Furthermore, it's extremely available. Toastmasters exists in 144 countries. So you can go a lot of places around the world and you can find a Toastmasters club. In fact, there are 14,700 plus clubs around the world. So just about any place you are at, you can find a Toastmasters club that you can become a part of to take advantage of this education opportunity and these kinds of soft skills development. Some of these clubs are entirely online. You don't even have to leave the comfort of your home. Or if you're traveling on the road, you can join the club meeting from wherever you happen to be at. Many of them meet in person, and there is a different dynamic for a club that meets in person than meets online. In fact, that brings up another really great point here is that every club tends to have its own kind of personality, which means that let's say that you were to, Gene, let's just say that you were going to go look for a Toastmasters club. And you went to our website, which is toastmasters.org. I said again, it's toastmasters.org. And you went to the website and you clicked on find a club and it gave you a list of clubs nearby. And you went and visited one of those clubs and you decided, well, I'm not sure this club quite works for me. I mean, the people are okay. I don't really click with them. They just seem kind of different from who I am. I don't know if this is a really good fit. Well, what would you do then, Gene?
Well, what would I do? I would probably look to see if there was a different group to check out and check them out.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You can go check out another club in the same area or online. So there's with all these clubs, all of us can find one that works well for us. Now, because each club has its own personality and culture, some clubs do things a little differently than others. Now, understand all club meetings work pretty much the same way. So you can be comfortable going from club to club because they really all do essentially the same things. And we all use the same educational material and program. So whatever you're working on in one club, you could actually still work on in another club. But they do have their own personalities and their uniqueness. In clubs, we generally divide into 2 or 3 different categories that you could think of. We call community clubs, which tend to be like churches, community centers, or real estate offices, restaurants, places that are open venues that anybody could come in and belong to them. Then we have what are referred to as closed clubs or restricted or corporate clubs, which is what they usually are, which are usually in some kind of a business or government facility that not just everybody has access to. But the people within that facility do have access to it. And so they're able to meet there and to take advantage of it, say over their lunch hour, for instance. We also have what we call, kind of loosely call, informally call regular clubs, which is where most beginning Toastmasters will start to begin developing those skills. And we have what we call advanced clubs. Now, advanced clubs take this to a new level. It's a different level of speaking, maybe a little bit more complicated types of projects, longer presentations, more difficult presentations, and the feedback is usually a little bit more rigorous because at this point we have experience in receiving and using feedback, and we're more comfortable with that. In fact, some of us look for clubs to do that. But beyond that, some of these clubs are really unique. And you mentioned Traveling Tastemasters, which is a club that you and I both belong to.
Mhm.
And Traveling Tastemasters is unique in that what it does is that every month we meet in a restaurant or a winery or some similar type of venue. Well, it's a lot of fun. And for some of us who are couples in Toastmasters, my wife and I both belong to Toastmasters, for instance, it's kind of our date weekend to go hang out with friends and do Toastmaster stuff, which we enjoy doing. But
Mhm.
beyond that, for people who want to learn public speaking, it's a great environment to learn because what happens in a restaurant when you're trying to speak, you have a presentation? Background noise. There's servers coming in and out. People are eating, so there's silverware clanking on plates. You have all these kinds of background noise. Sometimes there's music, background music that you can't get turned down enough that you have to actually talk over it. It's a wonderful environment to learn professional public speaking because it's the type of environment that professional public speaking happens in.
Mhm.
So we get two advantages here. We get this environment that's more challenging, which is great for learning public speaking at a higher level, but we also get to have a lot of fun doing it because we're having, dinner, lunch, some kind of a meal with our friends.
Mhm.
And we do this all around Northern Virginia. Now, actually, there are other. Let's talk about organization. I was about to say something that was going to make no sense because I was going to refer to something that I haven't explained. So let me explain it. The organization of Toastmasters fundamentally is the club. I've been talking about clubs, and that's where most of what we do happens. But since there are over 14,000 of these things worldwide, it kind of makes sense that we would have some kind of an organizational structure to support them. They're
Mhm.
essentially, legally, they're autonomous, but they need support. So we group our clubs in what we call areas, and that's anywhere from maybe 4 to 8. And an area director who is not in charge of them, they don't work for this area director, but who is there to advise and support. Above that, we have what we call divisions, and you might have 4 to 8 areas inside a division. It's just a higher administrative level to try and break out the workload for the support, working downward to all of our members. And then the divisions are what we call a district, which is really what you might call our operational level or our field level organizational unit. And that's what I was in charge of a few years ago. We have 1 year terms. We're elected, and it's a 1 year term. Then you move on to do other things. And we have 129 of those districts around the world, which are divided into regions. And there are 14 regions. Now, the office you mentioned I'm running for is actually to be an international director from one of those regions, which is really just the board of director of Toastmasters International. So the strategy, the policy, and the finances are handled by this board. There's a world headquarters staff with a CEO who takes care of all the actual doing stuff. And then it filters on down through the districts who are really manage the within the geographic area. And ours is Northern Virginia, for instance, everything outside the Beltway down to about Fredericksburg. And then you get all the way down to the clubs. So this club I'm talking about, Traveling Tastemasters, travels all around this district in Northern Virginia,
Mhm.
which is what I was going to say. I was going to say we do this inside this district, but I thought, maybe I'll say what a district is before I do that. So, so that's really that's kind of the quick and dirty on Toastmasters, who we are, what we do, and how long we've been doing it. And this one particularly really special club, which of course is a lot of fun to come to. I'd encourage people just to come visit because we do have a great time, and you'll hear some great speeches and some entertaining things. You'll learn something. That's always valuable.
Mhm.
And with that, I think I kind of covered everything I can cover here, Gene. So unless you have some sort of an additional question or something I said that made zero sense, you're saying, what was he talking about? We could clarify that.
Well, it made sense to me, but I'm just going to ask a couple questions, maybe for
Sure.
to clarify a little bit more for people. So,
Mm-hmm.
on the club level,
Mm-hmm.
how first question is how often do the clubs meet, and what can a person expect if they go to their first Toastmasters meeting as a guest?
Okay. That's a great question. Well, clubs will meet anywhere from once a week up to once a month. It depends on the club. We have many that will meet weekly. We have some that meet twice a month. We have some that just meet once a month. The traveling Toastmaster we talked about is just once a month, but that makes sense because it's the whole dinner and expense of doing that. But I've been in clubs that meet weekly. Some of them meet during the day, some of them meet at night, some of them meet in the morning. And so there's really all sorts of different times and frequencies that when clubs meet. Now, the question about what to expect you walk into a Toastmasters meeting as a guest is a really great question. So let's talk about that. Well, first off, you're going to walk into this environment where people are using this language that's going to make zero sense to you. Oh, no, you're saying, I don't want to walk into that. Okay, we're trying to become aware of that. But what's really great is that we know that when you walk in. And so one of the things we will do is to make the guest comfortable. And somebody should take the guest aside and sit down with them and explain to them how the meeting works, what the sequence of events is. And generally, the sequence of events is that we'll open the meeting. Depending on where you're at around the world, it may open with some kind of in the US, it may have a pledge to the flag. Some clubs do, some clubs don't. It might open with some kind of invocation. Some clubs do, some clubs don't. Might open with a joke. Some clubs do, some clubs don't. There's no requirement that they do any of those things, but it's things that some clubs have chosen to do. After that, we'll have what we call a Toastmaster of the meeting, or the Toastmaster of the day, or the Toastmaster of the evening. And that actually is our master of ceremonies who runs the meeting. And they will introduce the program and the agenda, and they'll introduce the team members there. And I'll talk about what this team is in a moment. And they'll introduce the speakers. And of course, we actually learn how to introduce speakers because there is kind of an art to that. So we introduce the speaker will give their presentation. And we could have anywhere from 1 to 2 to 3 of those speakers at a meeting, depending on how long the meeting is, how long their speeches are, and how many people are trying to get things done in the education program. We call that the prepared speeches, the prepared projects portion of the meeting. These are the ones that people have prepared in advance and practice to give at the meeting. Then somebody will be introduced, we call a table topics master. This is a really fun part of the meeting and really, really useful because this is where we practice impromptu speaking. The table topics master will ask a question, and then somebody who is there, and it can be a member. A guest is allowed to answer these questions, but they don't have to. But they will answer this question, and they have 1 to 2 minutes to do it. In other words, we're practicing the elevator speech. You catch your boss in the hallway, and you have maybe 30 seconds to talk. And I'm still on. I think my screen just blacked out.
Oh, you're fine. I see you.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Great. You gotta love technology. Yeah, we're rolling along here, and all of a sudden everything goes black.
But even if it did, we'd get right back on and keep rolling.
We get right back on and keep rolling. That's another thing. If you don't learn anyplace else, you learn at Toastmasters. We're flexible. But we were talking about the impromptu speaking, where you see your boss in the hall. You have about 30 seconds to make your pitch. You're talking to find a coworker. You got about 2 minutes. Somebody asks you a question about something you're involved in, and literally you're in the elevator, and that's all the time you have. So we actually practice that so we can do that pretty effectively. 1 to 2 minute speech is still a speech, and you can organize those. It's a learned technique, and we practice that. Well, after we do that, we move to what we call the evaluation section. And that's where most of the team is. We call a general evaluator. They'll be introduced, and they're evaluating the whole meeting, but they're also introducing their team, which includes a speech evaluator. Well, the speech evaluator will give feedback to the speaker for the prepared speeches. And this is based on what the project objectives and purpose are. And the speaker can use that then to apply to future speeches to become better and better. And what the feedback will vary, but it's always supposed to be positive and constructive. And this is really part of what makes our environment safe and what makes it work. Then we'll have somebody we call grammarian. We'll talk about how well we've used language, whether it's improperly used or whether we perhaps have used it particularly cleverly. We have what we call an ah counter, and that's somebody who catches all those filler words, ahs, and so's, like, all those things that we use as filler words because we're at the end of a thought and we're not quite ready for the next one. And we seem to think a sound needs to fill that void. So it helps us identify those so we can overcome that and become smoother. I mean, not that we never stop having them. I've had some today, for instance, but we learn how to do it so they don't disrupt the presentation. As you may have seen somebody, perhaps even a senior official someplace, get up and talk and go, oh, and it's very hard to listen to. We learn how to not do that so it gets smoother and easier to listen to, and so we can be heard and understood better. And after that, we have a timer. All the speeches are timed, so we can learn how to control the timing of our message. So we learn how to work within a time limit. And some clubs have some other things they add too. I mean, there are clubs that have a listener that will ask questions about the speeches to make sure we're all actually paying attention and listening.
Hmm.
We have some, I'm in a club where we actually evaluate the table topics responses about how well we gave that elevator speech. And that's useful. And and you get some of those kinds of things. And then see, if you ever grammarian, or an on-counter, you'd be catching that right now. But we have those various roles that we filled, and that we reach into the meeting. Usually there will be a short business meeting conducted by the club president. So that's what a guest could expect, that we would do all of those things. We introduce people, we use titles sometimes. Sometimes we'll introduce somebody, for instance, as a distinguished Toastmaster, because that's a title they learned, or maybe we'll have a 2 letters or 2 words and then a number, because like visionary communication level 4, for instance, because that's identifying where somebody's at in the education program. You'll hear those kinds of terms, and just for most of our guests, just kind of accept that, yes, we do have our lingo. It actually makes sense after a while, but the club will probably help you trying to work through that, so it's not too intimidating, or not something that just gets you so confused that you don't know what we're doing next. But basically, that's what the meeting has: prepared speeches, impromptu speaking, and evaluation portion. And then the meeting's done, and sometimes it'll break up and go someplace else. Somebody should reach out to the guest and get your impressions. You may be asked to introduce yourself and say what you thought of the meeting, how you felt about it, maybe perhaps if you're interested in becoming a part of Toastmasters, or they may follow up with you later. So I'm glad you asked that question, Jane, because it's useful to know what to expect before you walk in. So some of these meetings are totally open. I mean, there's a club I think that you and I have both been a part of that meets with the Chamber of Commerce a couple of times a month, and the meeting time's posted. People can just walk in. I mean, so they don't know anybody there, and so it's helpful to kind of know how this works.
Yep, that's Speak Up Manassas that Dana's referring to. As of right now, they meet, I believe, on the 2nd and 4th Mondays of the month at noon. But I think all of the schedules are posted online. So if you go to Toastmasters, you can do a search, find a club that's close to you, and find out exactly when they're meeting. And like Dana said, you can just pop in. But I do have a couple questions. My first question is for people who might really want to work on their public speaking skills, or know that they need to, and are really intimidated. They might be intimidated by that evaluation process. So what would you say to them?
I would say that if that's how you feel, then that's what you really need.
Yeah.
And I would also tell you, there's not a safer place to do this where you're going to find people that are more supportive of you. And the big reason for that is that, I can't say all, because some people actually were comfortable public speaking before they came into Toastmasters. They're just trying to get better at it. But most people, I say the vast majority of people, that's exactly how they felt when they first stepped into a Toastmasters club. I mentioned earlier the white knuckle death grip on the lectern. That happens. That's a real thing. When people get started, and it's a very normal to feel that way. We have a club officer who's called a vice president of education, who is ideally supposed to make sure that the evaluator is matched up to the speaker. So the first time you give your first few speeches, it's with somebody who's better at giving evaluation. Now, I cannot guarantee that happens, because it's subject to who's available, obviously. And so it's always possible you might get that one Toastmaster who just is not real good at giving positive evaluations. It's a one-off, it's a one-time thing. They still mean it with the best of intentions. It's just not the skills that they developed yet. So, but they are still there to help you. It is still a safe environment, and nothing's going to happen that carries outside of that. I mean, nobody calls your boss up and says, "Oh man, Jean gave this lousy speech today. You'd never let her talk anywhere." That's just not going to happen. So it really is safe.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned the different education programs that people could participate in. That sentence was just terrible. It ended in a preposition. What do you mean by those education programs? When somebody comes into Toastmasters, say they join, what different types of education programs can they do? Can they kind of do whatever they want?
To an extent. We all have one education program we call pathways, but within that program, there are different things we call paths. Kind of makes sense. Pathways are paths. And they all have a common level 1. They all start with the same thing, which is essentially fundamentals of public speaking. And that's all it really is just giving a speech. We call the first one the icebreakers, just to get up, give a speech, just get used to the idea of speaking. And that's all it's supposed to accomplish, is just getting up and talking. I mean, the evaluator will identify any skills you already have, and they may give you a couple of ideas about how you can proceed on getting better. But generally, that's all that first speech is really intended to do. And it's talking about you, something you know about. Then we go on to learning more about how to write a speech, how to give a speech. We have projects on how to use your vocal variety, how to use your voice to enhance the speech, to make the speech better. How to use gestures, which if you've been watching, you notice I've been using gestures, but because of my camera, occasionally it comes up into the screen. Mostly it doesn't.
Yeah.
It's a different environment doing this online, but when you're doing it in person, actually these things make more sense, and you learn how to do those. And so that's that first level. Second level goes a little bit more into mentoring. Some of them require a assessment of leadership styles. Some of them require an assessment of communication style. There's one other that's in there, and that's pretty much common to all the paths. Now after that, right now there are 11 different paths, and they're effective coach is one, dynamic leadership is one, engaging humor is one, visionary communication, strategic relationships. I mean, there's a bunch of these different things, but we are about to implement a brand new learning management system, and for that rollout, we've actually are bringing it back down to just 6 paths right now. So there's still a choice, but there's not as much of a choice immediately. Now that's a good thing, basically joining right now, because doing that rollout, because this is really going to help the Pathways program in terms of its interface becoming more intuitive and easier to. With fewer choices, it's easier people will join when this rolls out, so they actually can pick a path more easily. It has an assessment. You actually take an assessment online, and you answer a bunch of questions, and it will recommend what path most fits in response to those questions. In other words, you're basically telling it what it is you're trying to accomplish, and then it will give you a recommended path. You don't have to do that path, but it will give you a recommendation, and you can select that one. So, but everything happens inside those paths. Although now, having said that, a lot of what we learn actually does happen outside the formal education program. A lot of what we learn is by doing other things. It's by filling club officer positions. We learn how to manage a club from different officer positions. It's by running the club meeting, the meeting roles, which you mentioned some of those. Doing those helps us learn different skills. Moving up into the district leadership roles helps us learn those at a higher levels. So there are things that happen outside of the education program that are still great opportunities to learn. And there are actually some presentations that are available to give that are not in Pathways, but they're really good content. They're very helpful content to be involved with, to be associated with. So there's actually a lot of flexibility there in how you can build a program to work for yourself.
Okay. So somebody who works in, for example, the government contracting field might have a completely different path than, say, somebody like me who's an attorney and in court all the time versus somebody who is a doctor. We all do different things. So there's different paths available for us specifically for what we may need.
Not lined up with vocation, but yes, the way the paths are designed and what they cover, yes, absolutely. You could find one that most fits what you need to accomplish professionally, and then it would be different from, say, what someone else is trying to do. I've completed 2 of them myself. I've been involved in work. The first one I did was effective coaching. And I did that one because I was in leadership positions where being able to do that kind of coaching as part of leadership was a very useful skill for me to learn. So that's why I chose that one. Now, it's not something everybody's going to need, because they're not necessarily doing things where that's a big feature of what they need to be able to do. The second one I did was visionary communication. And that, again, was because of where I was at and the things I was doing. Being able to develop those skills was very relevant to me. And so I was doing that one. Now other people I know haven't done that one because it's just not something they need right now. They're focusing on perhaps the dynamic leadership more. There's my wife actually did one of strategic relationships, which actually had a lot of intercultural awareness. And I think that's one we may not actually have immediately in the new rollout. But you're exactly right. You can actually find one that fits you vocationally, and it may not be the same. But you can have all different ones happening in the club. Everybody in the club could be on a different path, and in different places in the path. It's not, and that it's still paced. It's not structured. So we don't all walk in and start level 1 and work our way up. You could choose a path, start level 1. I might be working on level 3 in a totally different path. Somebody else in the club might be on level 2 on the other third kind of path.
I forgot. I should have made a note of my question. What was my question? 2 questions. One, are the speeches limited to the club meetings, or are there any competitions that people might like to do if they were competitive? And my other question, I know the answer to that. And my other question relates to what it takes to be a distinguished Toastmaster, which you are.
Yes, twice over actually, but only one program now. Actually, there are two answers to your first question, and one answer is that you actually can give presentations outside of Toastmasters. You can do them in the workplace, or you can do them at wherever else that you're doing things. You can actually give a professional presentation or a presentation in another nonprofit or another group. For instance, if you're doing things in Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts or 4-H or anything like that, and you need to give a presentation, that actually could be an evaluated presentation for you. You're doing what you need to do, but the presentation can be evaluated so you improve your public speaking skills. But we do have something we call speech contests. And the idea here is that we do this at all levels, from the club all the way up to even an international one. In fact, in a couple of weeks, we will have something called the World Championship of Public Speaking. People have been working on this for months now, going through all levels, and we're going to see the best speakers in our world give up and give these presentations, and then there'll be a judging to figure out who's the best at it. But contests are a different kind of environment because you have certainly timing requirements and not content requirements, but there's a type of speech. There's international speech, which is anything you want to talk about, really, but usually there's some kind of a message. There's humor speaking, which is not a stand-up comedy routine. It's just using humor in speaking. Then we have an evaluations contest. We have a table topics contest. And there's a couple of other options that sometimes pop up. But it's a great opportunity because by doing it in this different environment, you're talking to different people. It's a different kind of situation. You don't get feedback, but you actually, in this case, you actually do get judged, but it's the friendly judging, whether or not you get trophies. So it's not bad judging. It's good judging. It's just fun competition. So that's another of those opportunities we have. And even just watching them is a great education opportunity. And then you had your second part of the question there, which I've already forgotten. So hopefully you remember it and you can remind me.
Oh, my second question, what does it take to, what makes you a distinguished Toastmaster?
Yes. Okay. Well, with the Pathways program, what you have to do is you have to complete 2 paths, and each path has 5 levels. And then there's a reflect on your path. That's a project outside of that. And the number of projects in the path varies depending on the path, but you completely can do 2 paths. You have to have filled a number of club roles in between 2 of those levels in order for the path to count. Then you have to have been a club president and participate in building what we call a club success plan. It's basically the goals for the year. And you have to have served in a district office. You have to have helped build a club, or you have to have mentored a club, which means you've helped them after their a new club. We call chartering a club when we get a brand new club. So you either have to sponsor them to help them become chartered, or mentor them afterwards so that they were their first 6 months, so they learn how to function as a club. You have to have coached a club, which is a club that is struggling, and basically advising them and coaching them to bringing them back into good health. And they have to achieve what we call distinguished status, where you get credit for that. So you have to do 2 of those 3 things. And there's some other options in there. You can do something we call a youth leadership program, which is basically it's a speaking camp, if you will, or speaking program for youth at 18 and under. It can be done in schools, can be done in, they're going like Boy Scouts. And in fact, my wife's actually done this for the Girl Scouts, where she's gone and given part of this to them to help them learn these skills. And there's a couple other things in there, but basically it's the 2 paths, the various club roles, the district office, this being involved in the youth leadership or building the clubs up. And I think that actually covers everything right there. Oh, and a capstone project. I knew it was there's a capstone project. After you've done all this, there's actually a larger project you have to complete. It can be anywhere. Actually, it does not have to be in Toastmasters, but you have to do a project that is of some tangible benefit to somebody. And you present your plan for this, present your vision, you build a team for it, you work through the whole thing, you plan the whole thing, you go up your milestones, and then you give a speech at the beginning, then you give a speech at the end that talks about not actually what you did, but what you learned from doing it. And we have some kind of smaller versions of that within some of the paths that we call high performance leadership. Not all the paths have them, but it's called high performance leadership. But you might kind of think of it as an introduction to project management, because the skills that they teach us actually kind of go that direction. So they're really useful things to do. And there again, you can do them anywhere. They can be in something in Toastmasters, outside Toastmasters. The great thing about this is because it's an education program, whatever it is you're trying to do with this project, It doesn't even have to succeed. I mean, the project can be a total failure. That's not the purpose. Is not to succeed at the project. The purpose is to go through the process and to learn from doing it. And now, how many times can you do that in work?
Yeah, not too many. Not too many. Well, that's a lot to become a distinguished Toastmaster. So, Dana, you obviously have accomplished a lot. You are a great person to learn from. And I will tell everybody watching that I absolutely love all of his speeches. The last one I saw, you were impersonating Winston Churchill. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah. I have more hair, but if you look past that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I do want to get to talking about the position that you are running for the International Board of Directors before I keep going, because I want to talk about that because that's a huge accomplishment. So I'm just going to do a brief recap. Correct me if anything is wrong here. Dana is running for the director spot for our region and of the world, and there are 14 regions within Toastmasters, and I believe seven of those regions are being or have elections this year. And the international board is selecting that director from each region at the international conference, which is taking place in 2 weeks in the Bahamas. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
It's not always in the Bahamas. It is this year.
Well, yes. Well, I should note that if you join Toastmasters, you're not always going to the Bahamas. So can you tell us, because that's a huge accomplishment for you to have even gotten that far. Can you tell us what you would do, what your responsibilities are on the international board of directors and how that helps us at the local level who might personally know you and be involved in clubs with you?
Okay. Actually, I'll go a little bit broader than that. I'll actually talk about the international organization of which the board is a piece. You have a world headquarters, they're the staff, and they actually do the day-to-day operations. They're the ones that send out materials from the Toastmasters tour. They're the ones that take the calls, answer the questions. They're the ones that bring in and maintain the IT system. They're the ones that they actually spend the money. That's where the comptroller is and the controller is. So you have that piece, and they're all there, and they're actually hired by the chief executive officer. The chief executive officer reports to the board, and the board of directors consists of 14 directors, one from each region, plus a second vice president, first vice president, a president-elect, a international president, and then a past international or immediate past international president. And the board is responsible really for doing three things. The board is responsible for developing strategy, doing the strategic planning for the organization, for developing and overseeing policy, and is responsible for overseeing and managing the finances. So that's where the fiduciary responsibility for the organization resides. And so those are really the three responsibilities that it has. But this is for the entire international organization. So the board's responsible for this across all 144 countries worldwide. And so that's where those high levels of decisions get made. There's another, within the region, there's another individual. It's called a region advisor. And most regions will have at least one. Some actually have two. Ours does, for instance. And their role is completely different. I mean, they're kind of actually, they really report to the international president, and their job is to help the districts. Their direct support to the districts and direct liaison back to the international world headquarters and the international staff. And what they do is they work with the districts by providing support, providing coaching, doing peer calls, helping them move best practices back and forth. And they do the training of the district, the top three district officers. Now, the other district officers are trained by those top three, but they do train those top three officers of your district director, your program quality director, and your club of growth director. Now, the selection process of these two is different. A region advisor applies essentially to world headquarters. They produce a training video. They go through an interview process. They do a 360 assessment. They get interviewed, and then they get appointed by the board or by the world headquarters to do this position. And they have about 16-month term with an overlap. Now, the international directors are elected by the entire membership. Every club has 2 votes. And so the process there is a little different. So when the international director is you essentially self-nominate. I mean, you can be nominated by someone else, but you actually have to put in your own nomination, because otherwise, you have to accept it at least. So you go to put this package in that you're willing to run. You submit a bio. They put, then you get and a couple other things. Then they get they send out a 360 assessment to all the people you worked with when you were a district leader. You have to have been a district director to run for the board, or to be a region advisor. So both of those required to at least to have led a district. And then the nominating committee or leadership committee looks at all those. They all get interviewed. And then a certain number of those are put forward by the leadership committee as actual nominated candidates. And every year there are some people who nominate themselves who do not make that cut. They can still run. They can run from the floor, but they do that with less support from the international organization. And then we spend the next several months talking to all the district leaders, talking to past leaders, learning everything we can about what's going on in the organization. And then we have this election where every club takes his 2 votes. Actually, every club doesn't take his 2 votes. They all could, but they don't all. But they go, and this one vote happens at the international election, and we actually will be there. We have something called the Candidates Corner, where we're there to talk to people and answer questions. And then all the candidates will go through what's called the Candidate Showcase, where we'll have 6 minutes to answer a bunch of questions that have been submitted from the membership, and then they're asked in front of this entire audience of thousands of people. And so he's basically thinking in front of like 10 people at clubs intimidating, thinking about speaking at this business meeting. And then there's a 2-minute speech during the business meeting that each contested candidate gets up and gives a speech. The speech can basically be about whatever they want it to be. As soon as they can have something to do with what trying to get elected. But that's it. So there again, that's in front of the entire membership. Then they take a vote. So yeah, getting to this level of even being a candidate and running really is an accomplishment. There's actually a lot that goes into getting to just being nominated or being able to run. Then of course, actually getting elected, it's then a 2-year term. And so that's so basically you're talking about 3 years of your life going to getting elected and then actually being on the board.
Yeah. So district director. So a district. So you have your clubs, you have areas, you have division, and then you have district. Is that how?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Exactly.
So when you were a district director, you were in charge of, well, it was in your bio, but I can't remember how many clubs.
I had 7 divisions with 31 areas, and we had right around 130 clubs.
Wow. So clearly Dana has done a lot within Toastmasters, and Dana enjoys Toastmasters. To be pursuing just the fact that you have to speak in front of thousands and thousands of people. That's quite impressive. So one benefit of Toastmasters is now I notice every time I say well and so, and then I get mad at myself, but at least I'm paying attention to it.
I tell you something, if there's a dark side of Toastmasters is that will absolutely ruin your ability to listen to most of the people you hear speaking at work.
Dana is right about that. And also upspeak when people end their sentences like it's a question, but it's a statement. Yeah. But so I joined Toastmasters a few years ago, actually in the beginning of COVID, which was an odd time to join, but we didn't know how long the restrictions were going to be in place. So I joined when everything was online, and then I got really busy with work. So I was out of it for a while, but I really enjoyed it. And I got back into it recently. I'm a member of 2 clubs. I like it for so many reasons. One, it might sound weird, but I do enjoy public speaking. I think I am good at it. I would hope so with my job, but I also know there's always room to improve. I mean, I know I need to improve. And I have enjoyed every speech that I have done, even though I was nervous with all of them, and I probably still always will be. That's actually a good question. Do the nerves ever go away?
It's ideally no, and I say it that way because there actually is help have a little bit of nervous energy. You don't want to get so good and so comfortable that you can sort of ho hum about it, because that actually hinders you in connecting with the audience and being engaging with the audience. So it's always good to have just a little bit of nervous energy there. That's actually kind of helpful. But what does happen is you get under control where it doesn't limit you. It's not something that stops you. It's not something that prevents you from doing it. It's something that it becomes part of. Okay, I'm hyped. I'm good. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to do this. Let's do this kind of thing. And so you actually project it into the speech. Now, having said that, that means sometimes you can be in a club for so long, you know people so well, and you've done so many speeches that you actually get to the point that it's just that you don't have any energy in it. So it's not as much fun when that happens. But you actually can. But that's why it's so good to go to different clubs or do the speech
Mhm.
contest, because it moves you out of that comfortable environment to some place where you get challenged again.
Mhm.
It's interesting is that we actually now we have every in Toastmasters from people that stammer, stutter, shake. Every other word is a number knob because they're that nervous or that scared of public speaking. All the way up to the fact that we actually have a lot of members who are members of the National Association of Public Speakers, and they still come to Toastmasters because the National Association gives them bookings. That's where you do the network to get jobs, but the
Mhm.
feedback they get to continue to improve is inside Toastmasters.
Right. Mhm. Well, that makes sense. Now, you mentioned visiting different clubs. Well, first question, which I know the answer to these questions, but for people who don't, do if you join Toastmasters, do you have to say you are going to a specific club, or can you go to any club that you want to go to?
Both. You actually have to join a specific club because your membership has to reside someplace. Somebody has to be responsible for you, but you can visit any club you want. I mean, if there's any restrictions they have, for instance, I was in a club that met inside a secure government facility, and while it was possible for you to visit, the headache to anybody trying to do it was normally just not worth the trouble. But it wasn't because you weren't allowed to on Toastmaster side. But
Mhm.
you can, once you're Toastmaster, you can visit any country you want, anywhere around the world. I mean, it's in you know all kinds of stories of people who travel various places. They dropped in someplace, they called up a local Toastmasters club, people have walked into their meetings. Sometimes they've done other things to help them out. We have pins we wear. Actually, this is actually a past district director pin here, but there's a Toastmasters pin a lot of people wear. Sometimes you'll see that on somebody, say, oh, I'm a Toastmaster too. It's automatic connection, automatically strikes up a conversation. For instance, my wife and I are going to be traveling later this year, and so of course this campaign, I've actually talked to district leaders of the two districts that have to cover the areas we're going to be in, with open invitations from both to get in touch with them as soon as we get there, and they'll hook us up with somebody and just kind of help show us around if we want to do that.
Oh, nice. So in addition to learning actual skills, it sounds like it's a good place for camaraderie, networking, just a good social organization to be around like-minded people who have similar interests.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not an advertised benefit, but it's a huge benefit that actually does happen.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of my impression from what I have noticed from Toastmasters and the way that you're, describing it in the international level. It's a way for you to meet people that you would never meet otherwise doing
Mhm.
this. Yeah.
It absolutely is. I mean, just this week, I have talked to people from India and Australia and various states around the country here. So it's in fact, in the past, let's see, what do I have coming up here? In the past week, yeah, literally the past week, I've talked to Singapore, Sri Lanka, India, the Philippines, China. Yeah, it's just amazing.
Wow.
And Poland, and I guess they were actually the other group was, where were they? I think they were actually all in Switzerland, but their district included a bunch of other places.
Wow. That's a lot.
So,
um, so the Toastmasters convention, it's a yearly international convention where anybody from any club throughout the world
mhm,
can go to that convention, right?
mhm. Yes,
And at
yeah,
that
absolutely.
convention, we talked about the elections for the
Mhm.
International Board of Directors, but what else transpires at that convention? What can people expect
Uh,
if they attend that?
Education sessions. I mean, it's full of education sessions. We get a lot of keynote speakers in, a lot of professional speakers in that will do various educational sessions. So those are available. We have a really dynamic and outstanding opening ceremonies where the district leaders march in with the flags of all the countries that are in Toastmasters. Is a very impressive thing to watch, and it really gives you the idea of just how big this organization is. A lot of people will wear whatever their ethnic native dress is, and so it's very colorful, and that's a lot of fun. We have something we call a Golden Gavel Award, which is for a speaker that somebody has been recognized by the international organization as having substantially contributed to people's development and education, and for enhancing public speaking skills. And that gets recognized every year. We have networking lunches. The Toastmaster store is open. And for people who are in Toastmasters, ever try to order something, if you need to buy something, the place to do it is at the convention. There's no shipping charges, and you get it right then. So definitely the
Nice.
best way to do it. You get to meet the leaders, the district level, international level. They're all there. All the leaders are there. You know, opportunities to talk to the staff. And then we have the World Championship Public Speaking, the semifinals first, and then we actually have the finals, the International Championship of Public Speaking. So lots of opportunities to hear these people who have gone through at that point about 5 different levels of competition can come and give their speeches. And it's entertaining, and if you're wanting to be a better speaker, it's valuable just to watch how other people are doing this and the techniques they use.
Yeah, there's always room for learning. Even if you're not giving a speech yourself, you're learning from watching somebody else and hearing the feedback that they get from their speech. Yeah. One other question I wanted to ask, because I know your time is very valuable and we've gone way longer than I said we would go. Are there opportunities for people to engage in other events, networking type events within Toastmasters that aren't just meetings? Are there socials? Are there parties? Are there local trainings, things like that?
There definitely are local trainings. We have something called Toastmasters Leadership Institute, which we're actually starting to do back in person again. They've been online for the past few years. We do still have online sessions for some of the officer positions. But these are primarily intended to train the club officers in their roles and responsibilities so they can perform those duties more effectively. And basically, by knowing what you're supposed to do, it reduces frustration because you're not just floundering around saying, well, I have this title, I don't know what to do with it. We actually give you training on that at every level. So it's primarily club officers, but our district, it does include other education sessions. It varies what those might be. It depends on what the needs and the interest needs to be at the time. Again, my wife does one on how to speak, do public speaking in person, because that's just, many of our members joined during the pandemic entirely online. They've never actually seen that done. They don't really know what those skills are. She does a session on that, and people really, they eat it up. They just love that session because it's giving them information they haven't had a chance to see in the club yet. Sometimes we'll do leadership things. We'll do more training on the actual education program so people understand how it works, or and what those positions has to manage it, how to manage it. There's lots of different kinds of sessions that happen at those. Now, as far as the social events, there are a couple that we do every year. And now clubs can have their own. I mean, members can always gather on their own, certainly, but the district here does 2 of them. We have a Hail and Farewell, which is coming up. Actually, that's this month. It's actually, I think it's this weekend.
It's August 6th.
My calendar, but
August 6th from 6 to 8:30, because I'm trying to get into it because it's already sold out. That's how I know when it is. Yeah. But tell us about the Hail and Farewell.
Hail and Farewell is where we do the official formal changeover of last year's leadership with this year's leadership. So we'll use that with a guest speaker. Usually we will then install the new district officers and district director on down, and relieve the old ones of their responsibilities, which they've actually stopped doing already because the year's over, but we actually formally relieve them. So there's a formality here and a kind of a ritual, if you will, but that just like changing of the guard, changing of the year. We'll have a keynote speaker, and we have a really good dinner, and that's important. Ours does not include dancing. Some districts do. We don't do dancing here. Maybe we will someday. We also have a mid-year gala, which is kind of similar. It's more of an mid-year award ceremony, recognizing what people have done from the beginning of the program year. The Hail and Farewell will include awards as well, but as does our district conference that we have every year in May. But the gala is there's not a program, but there's not an installation the same way. It's just a speaker, it's just the dinner, and some word recognition. We have had some entertainment in them from time to time. It kind of depends on who's running them and what they want to do. So there's a lot of variety here and how that can be done. But they are great social events. Anybody can go. You don't have to be a club president. You don't have to be a district leader. You don't have to be a DTM. I mean, any member can go, and it's worth going. I mean, it's a networking event. It's a chance to meet other people in a social setting. Where you can talk and ask questions that you might not have a chance to ask otherwise.
That's true. And I learned something. I didn't even know there was a gala. And I usually try to find out about all the different networking events, and I like to meet people, and especially being fairly new back into Toastmasters, I want to try to meet as many people as possible and go to as many events as possible, especially because things are starting to open up more, you know, with being shut down from COVID. Oh, but one other thing I wanted, excuse me, to mention, you talked about, I believe you talked about some clubs meeting online, some meeting in person. Some clubs meet only in person, correct? And then some meet only online. And do
Right.
some do a hybrid?
There are some that do a hybrid.
Okay.
Not as many as you might think. I would have thought there'd be more of those, but yeah, there's some that actually do the combination, the hybrid of both, the online and in person. And the reason we don't have more of them is doing a quality hybrid meeting that's really inclusive to the online members and that's interesting for everybody is actually a fairly complex thing to do, and there's really a lot that goes into doing that, but it can be done. A lot of clubs do it, and they do it very effectively. So that option does exist as well.
Okay. So there are options for people who want to do in person or who don't want to do in person for whatever
Yeah.
reason. There are. Oh, and another question. Does a person have to join a group that's close to them? Say, for example, you live in Manassas, but you really like this club in Fredericksburg. Can you join that one?
Sure. I mean, if it's in person, I mean, you have to go there for the meetings, but you may be down there doing something anyway. Or
Right.
it all depends on how far is too far to you. I mean, some people say that'll be too far. Other people is okay. They go further than that for lots of other things. It's just not a big deal. So you're not geographically restricted at all. I mean, any club you can get to that you want to go to, you can do that. And of course, and again, some of these meet online, so you can belong to a club clear across the globe somewhere if you want to. I actually belong to two clubs. One is Traveling Toastmasters that meets entirely in person. The other is called Leader Circle. It meets entirely online. And so I get both those experiences.
Oh, well, that's nice to be able to do something different. And plus, online, it's much easy. It's harder to make an excuse to not go to an online meeting because with traffic and everything.
Yep.
So, and that's another thing that might inhibit some people because of the traffic and the problems getting around in their work schedule. Whereas if they can just sign on what they're doing right now from wherever they're at, they have so many more opportunities to be involved.
Yeah, especially here, of course, where traffic is a thing, definitely is a thing.
Oh, yes. Yeah, this laryngitis doing Toastmasters and with my job, it's been tough for me. Well, Dana, I've kept you for so long. Is there anything I'd love to have you back another time. Is there anything else that you want to tell us about Toastmasters? I have a lot of people that watch this live, and then some people watch the replay later. So if they can always get back to us with questions. Is there anything else you want to tell us before we get?
I mean, the only thing I say is that at a bare minimum, people should at least visit a club and see what it's all about. In fact, really, before deciding whether it's something worth or not, they ought to visit 2 or 3 clubs, because that first one, just for whatever reason, it may not just be the people that you click with. It may not even be a good meeting. So every club occasionally has a meeting. It just doesn't go the way they want it to. And so we come a little slack and either go back that one again or try more than one. But everybody should at least check it out, look at it, see what they do, be part of it. Decide maybe it might help you or not. But really, if you're working any place today, you really do need to develop soft skills. And public speaking is a soft skill. The interpersonal communication is a soft skill. Leadership's a soft skill. You need all those skills, and this really is a good place to get those. If you really take full advantage of the program, you actually can develop all those skills and then carry them out into whatever else that you're doing with your life. So that's a big my last plug there. Other than that, though, I think we probably have given a sufficiently large fire hose here that the many 2 or 3 viewings to sort it out again. I'd be happy to come back sometime. Of course, when I get back in the country here after the next few trips we have coming up.
Yes, well, Dana gets to go to the Bahamas, but he's not going to be relaxing. He's going to be working, and then he's going out of town, out of the country with his wife for a while. So yeah, he will be busy. Maybe we can hone in on a specific aspect of business just to talk about instead of everything. But this was good. It gives a broad description of what a club is like, what people can expect, and what the organization does. So before I end the broadcast, Dana, I always forget to tell people, once I end this on Facebook, you and I will still be here so we can chat for a second. But I just wanted to say thank you so much. I really, really do appreciate your time. I know how busy you are, but I feel like this conversation was very useful. And every once in a while, somebody listens to one of my videos, and it really hits them for whatever they need, whether it's they need somebody to come work on something in their home or whatever the issue is. So I really like getting the word out there because I really like Toastmasters. You've been involved 10 years, 10 years, way longer than me, but I love it. And I just like to advocate for it because I think it's something that everybody should check out and try to do. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing all of your experience with us. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I was happy to do it. I like you. I want to get the word out every chance I get because it
Mhm,
is such a great program and it does so much for people. And
mhm,
and there's those upfront benefits of becoming a better
mhm.
public speaker. Yeah, you see that, but there's so much more to it that people get out of it. That it's that the more that people learn, the more they know about, the more opportunities they have to go check it out.
Mhm.
The more people we can help.
That's true. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Dana, and thank you everybody for tuning in. And I will see you on my next Facebook Live
Okay.
in 2 weeks.
Mhm.
Thanks.
Okay.